You don't belong in this school. Stop pretending. The words cracked across the classroom like a whip. Every head turned. Chairs creaked. Pens stopped mid-sentence. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to hesitate, like the room itself wasn't sure if it had heard correctly. At the front of the room, Mr. Hargrove stood rigid, one hand gripping the edge of his desk, the other pointed, sharp, accusing, at the boy in the third row. Daniel Reyes didn't move. He sat still, shoulders relaxed, hands folded loosely on his desk, eyes lifted, not defiant, not fearful, just present. You heard me, Hargrove continued, voice rising, feeding on the silence. This is not a place you just walk into because you think you deserve it. This school has standards. A few students shifted uncomfortably, others didn't. They leaned back, watched, some smirked, because this wasn't new. Not really. Not here. St. Bartholomew Academy had been standing for over 100 years, tucked behind iron gates and old trees in Southern California, the kind of place where legacy mattered more than merit. At least, that's how it had evolved. Old money, old names, old rules, the kind you didn't question. And Daniel Reyes, he didn't look like he belonged to any of it. Students like you, Hargrove said, his voice quieter now, more controlled, but sharper, more precise, should be grateful you're even allowed in a place like this. There it was. The line. It landed exactly how he wanted it to. A ripple moved through the room, subtle but real. A few students glanced at each other. One girl near the window looked down at her desk. A boy in the back chuckled under his breath. And just behind Daniel, a quiet kid named Marcus froze, because he'd seen this before. Different school, different teacher, same tone, same outcome, or at least the usual one. Hargrove stepped closer. Do you think this is some kind of joke? He pressed. You ignore instructions, you question authority, and then you sit there like you're above it all? Daniel blinked once, calm, measured. No, he said softly. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just no. Hargrove laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Then explain it to me, he snapped. Explain why you think you can just, rewrite how things work here? A pause. The room leaned in. Daniel tilted his head slightly as if considering the question, not rushing, not scrambling. I'm not trying to rewrite anything, he said. His voice was even. Too even. It didn't match the tension in the room. It didn't match the heat coming off the teacher. And that made it worse. Hargrove's jaw tightened. Then what are you doing? Daniel glanced around the classroom, not nervously, not searching for support, just observing. The polished wood desks, the framed photos of past graduating classes lining the walls, rows of identical faces year after year, the crest above the chalkboard. Veritas. Disciplina. Honor. Truth. Discipline. Honor. He looked back at Hargrove. I'm just trying to understand, he said. A few students frowned. Hargrove's expression darkened. Understand what? Why things are done the way they are. The words were simple, but they didn't land that way. Because in this room, in this school, that wasn't a neutral question. It was a challenge. Hargrove exhaled sharply. You don't question tradition, he said. You respect it. Daniel nodded once. I agree. That threw the room off. Hargrove blinked. What? I agree, Daniel repeated. You should respect tradition. A beat. Something shifted, just slightly. Marcus leaned forward, confused. The girl by the window looked up again, because that wasn't how this was supposed to go. Daniel wasn't pushing back. He wasn't folding either. He was holding something, something just out of reach. Hargrove narrowed his eyes. Then stop acting like you're above it. I'm not. Then why do you keep interrupting, questioning, acting like the rules don't apply to you? Daniel paused, and for the first time there was the faintest hint of something else in his expression. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to disappointment. I thought the rules were supposed to mean something, he said. A few students shifted again, because that didn't sound like rebellion. It sounded like belief, and that made it uncomfortable. Hargrove scoffed. They do mean something. That's exactly the point. Then why do they feel different? The question hung in the air. No one laughed this time. Even the boy in the back stayed quiet. Hargrove straightened, pulling himself up taller, reclaiming control. Careful, he said, voice low. You're walking a very thin line. Daniel nodded. I know. Good, Hargrove said. Because I'm done entertaining this. You will follow instructions. You will respect authority, or you will not be here. There it was. Clear, simple, final. The kind of statement that usually ended things, the kind that forced people to shrink, to apologize, to fall back in line. Marcus braced for it. The apology, The silence, the collapse, but Daniel didn't move, didn't look down, didn't rush to speak. He just sat there, breathing, present, as if the threat didn't land the way it was supposed to. And that's when the murmurs started. Quiet at first, whispers. Who does he think he is? Why isn't he just saying sorry? Is he trying to get expelled? Hargrove heard it too, and it fed him. He stepped closer again, looming now. Last chance, he said. You either learn your place here, or you lose it. Silence. Heavy. Pressing. Daniel looked at him. Really looked at him. Not with defiance, not with submission, just clarity. I don't think I'm the one who's confused about that, he said. The room froze, because that was different. Not loud, not aggressive, but it landed. Hard. Hargrove's face flushed. Excuse me? But Daniel didn't elaborate, didn't explain, didn't backtrack. He just sat there, calm, still, as if he had already said everything he needed to. And for the first time since the outburst began, Hargrove hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough, because somewhere in the back of the room, Marcus felt it, that shift, small, barely there, but real. Something wasn't lining up. Something about this wasn't normal. And Daniel Reyes? He wasn't acting like someone trying to stay. He was acting like someone who had never questioned whether he belonged at all. The bell hadn't rung yet, but the room already felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something, for the moment when this would either collapse or become something no one in that classroom was ready for. The room didn't reset after the bell. It fractured. Clusters of students whispered as they filed out, casting glances back at Daniel like he had just stepped outside the rules of gravity, and no one quite understood how he was still standing. Principal's office, Hargrove said sharply, grabbing a folder off his desk. Now. Daniel stood without protest. No rush, no hesitation, just compliance, but not submission. That difference lingered in the air as he followed. The administrative wing felt colder, quieter, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was controlled. Framed portraits lined the walls, past headmasters, donors, legacy families, all of them white, all of them staring down with the same curated authority. Hargrove walked faster here, like this was his territory again. You've embarrassed yourself, he muttered without turning, and now you're going to embarrass your family too. Daniel didn't respond. They reached the office. Inside, 3 people were already waiting. Vice Principal Ellison, 2 members of the faculty board, and seated off to the side, a woman in designer sunglasses, arms crossed, lips tight, a parent. Ellison looked up first, irritation already loaded. This is him? Hargrove nodded. Disruptive, disrespectful, questions authority in front of the entire class. The parent scoffed. Unbelievable. These scholarship cases are getting worse every year. Daniel stood in the center of the room, still, silent, observed, like an object under review. Ellison folded her hands. Name. Daniel Reyes. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, then dismissed it. Of course, she said flatly. And who exactly do you think you are, Daniel? No answer. Hargrove stepped in. He thinks he can challenge how this institution runs, as if he knows better than people who have dedicated their lives to it. One of the board members leaned forward. Let's be clear, this school has survived for over a century because we maintain order, structure, hierarchy, and respect. And respect, Ellison added. The parent let out a short laugh. Respect has to be earned, not assumed. Her eyes swept over Daniel, slow and deliberate. Students like you come in here and think just because you made it through admissions, you're equal to everyone else. She shook her head. You're not. Silence. Heavy. The words hung there longer than they should have. Marcus would have looked away. Most people would. Daniel didn't. He met her gaze, calm, unflinching, and that made her shift just slightly. Hargrove noticed and pushed harder. You've been given an opportunity most people would kill for, he said. And instead of being grateful, you disrupt, question, challenge. I asked a question, Daniel said quietly. That was it, but it cut through everything. Ellison's eyes sharpened, and now you're interrupting again. I'm clarifying. You're deflecting, Hargrove snapped. No, Daniel said. A pause. Measured. I'm trying to understand why asking questions is treated like disobedience. The board member scoffed. Because you don't have the standing to ask them. There's a process, Ellison added. You follow it, or you leave. The parent leaned forward now, voice dropping. You should be grateful you're even sitting in this room instead of being escorted off campus. Another pause. And then, she said it. Students like you should be grateful you're even allowed in a place like this. The line landed heavier here, more deliberate, more poisonous. No classroom buffer, no crowd to soften it, just adults saying it plainly. Daniel didn't react, not visibly, but something in the room shifted again, a tension that didn't belong to him. That's when the door opened. No knock, no announcement, just opened. A man stepped in, older, composed, tailored suit that didn't try to impress. It didn't need to. The room didn't recognize him immediately, but something about his presence made Ellison stand. Sir, this is a private. She stopped because he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Daniel. And Daniel, for the first time, moved. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just a small shift of posture. Recognition. Lolo, he said softly. The word barely carried, but it hit like a detonation. The room went still. The man's expression softened for a brief second, then returned to neutral. Measured, controlled, he stepped further in, closed the door behind him. Continue, he said calmly, eyes still on Daniel. Hargrove frowned. Excuse me, this is an internal disciplinary. The man turned, slowly, and in that movement, everything changed. Because now they saw him, really saw him. Ellison's face drained. The board member straightened abruptly. The parents' confidence flickered. Manuel Reyes stood in the center of the room, founder, owner, the name etched into the cornerstone of the school itself, a name they passed every day without thinking, a name they had forgotten, or worse, rewritten, and now it was standing in front of them, looking at them. Please, Manuel said, voice calm, almost gentle, don't stop on my account. Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Hargrove swallowed. We were just addressing... I heard you, Manuel said, still calm, still controlled. His eyes moved back to Daniel, softened again, just slightly. You're doing fine, he said quietly. Then he looked back at the others, and whatever warmth had been there was gone. Now, he said, let's hear it again. No one wanted to, but the weight of the room demanded it. Ellison tried to recover. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. No, Manuel said, not louder, but final. Repeat it. The parent shifted in her seat, uncomfortable now, aware. I think, perhaps. Repeat, Manuel said. A beat, long, painful, and then Hargrove spoke, because he had started this. Students like him, he said, voice thinner now, should be grateful they're allowed in a place like this. Silence. Absolute. Manuel nodded once. Slow, deliberate, as if confirming something he already knew. And then he took a step forward. The room didn't breathe. Manuel Reyes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room had already collapsed into silence, every word now carrying more weight than anyone inside it could withstand. He looked at Hargrove, then at Ellison, then at the parent, one by one, measured, unhurried. You've mistaken access for authority, he said. The sentence didn't land like an accusation. It landed like a verdict. Hargrove tried to speak. Mr. Reyes, Manuel lifted a hand, not aggressive, just enough. And Hargrove stopped, mid-breath. You walk through gates you did not build, Manuel continued. You sit in rooms you did not earn, and somewhere along the way, you started believing they belonged to you. No one interrupted. No one moved. You speak of standards, Manuel said, eyes settling on Ellison now, of discipline, of tradition. A pause. Do you know what this school was built for? Ellison swallowed. Of course. Excellence. Leadership. No, Manuel said, still calm, but final. It was built for dignity. The word hung there. Unfamiliar, heavy. My father started this school with 12 students, Manuel continued. Immigrants, children of laborers, families who were told they would never belong in rooms like this. His gaze flicked briefly to Daniel, then back. They were told to be grateful for scraps, to stay quiet, to accept less. Another pause, and he refused. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Asians, Manuel said plainly. That was the foundation. That was the purpose, not exclusion, not hierarchy. Not this performance of superiority you've all grown so comfortable with. The parent shifted, trying to recover some ground. With respect, Mr. Reyes, this school has evolved. The families who attend now, Manuel turned to her, and whatever she had been about to say, stopped. Because for the first time, there was no softness left in his eyes. You're no longer welcome here, he said. Just like that. No build-up. No escalation. The words hit harder than anything raised in anger. Her mouth opened. Excuse me? You heard me, Manuel said. Any family that teaches their children to look down on others has no place in a school built on dignity. That's outrageous, she snapped, standing now. Do you have any idea who we are? Manuel nodded once. Yes, he said, and I've just made it very clear what that means. Silence crashed back in. She looked around for support. There was none. Not anymore. Ellison stepped forward quickly. Mr. Reyes, perhaps we can discuss this more privately. No, Manuel said again. He didn't even look at her this time. This is exactly where it should be discussed. Public. Unavoidable. Final. He turned to Hargrove. You humiliated a student, he said. Not for misconduct, not for failure, but for asking a question. Hargrove's voice shook now. I was maintaining order. You were maintaining ego, Manuel corrected. A beat. You're finished here. The words landed with surgical precision. Hargrove blinked. You can't just... I can, Manuel said, and I have. A long pause. Hargrove looked to Ellison, to the board members. No one met his eyes because the authority he had leaned on had vanished. Ellison tried again, her tone shifting to something closer to pleading. We've all worked very hard to uphold the values of this institution, and yet you forgot them, Manuel said. Now he looked at her, directly. You allowed this culture to grow, to harden, to replace what this school was meant to be. Her composure cracked, just slightly. I was protecting the school's reputation. No, Manuel said. You were protecting the comfort of people who benefit from forgetting. Silence. Then, you're done as well. Ellison's breath caught. This is my life's work. No, Manuel said quietly. This was mine. The distinction cut deeper than anything else. She stepped back, slowly, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. The two board members didn't wait to be addressed. They stood, straightened their jackets, but said nothing, because they understood they had watched, they had agreed, and that was enough. You'll receive formal notice, Manuel said without looking at them, effective immediately. No argument, no negotiation, just over. The room, once full of authority, now felt hollow, stripped, exposed. The parent moved toward the door first. Faster now. No longer composed, no longer certain, the others followed, one by one, avoiding eye contact, avoiding the weight of what had just happened, until the room was empty, except for two people, Manuel Reyes and Daniel. The silence that followed was different, not tense, not heavy, just still, restored. Manuel exhaled slowly, the only sign that anything had affected him at all. Then he looked at his grandson. You handled that well, he said. Daniel shrugged slightly. They didn't know. Manuel nodded. That's the problem. A pause. Then he stepped closer. Not as an owner, not as a founder, just as a grandfather. They forgot what this place was for, he said, and when people forget, they start believing the wrong things. Daniel looked around the office, at the empty chairs, the quiet. They thought it belonged to them. Yes, Manuel said, that happens when no one reminds them otherwise. Another pause. Then you will, Manuel added. Daniel looked at him, not surprised, not overwhelmed, just understanding. Manuel's voice softened, but only slightly. You weren't brought here to fit in, he said. You were brought here to lead. The words settled between them, not as pressure, as truth. Let this be your first lesson, Manuel continued. Authority doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. He glanced toward the door, where everything had just unraveled. It comes from knowing exactly why the room exists. Daniel nodded once, and for a moment, nothing else needed to be said. Outside, the halls of St. Bartholomew Academy continued as they always had. Students moving, voices echoing, the illusion intact. But inside that office, something had shifted, permanently, because the people who had mistaken proximity for power were gone, and the one who had never needed to prove he belonged was still standing, calm, unchanged, exactly where he was meant to be. If Daniel's story moved you, don't just watch, act. Share this with someone who's been told they don't belong in rooms built on their own legacy. Then do more. Respect the quiet ones who don't argue because they don't need to. The student you dismiss, the kid you underestimate, the one who asks questions instead of staying silent. Support spaces that honor dignity over status. Challenge systems that reward arrogance over truth. Call out disrespect, even when it's normalized. Invest in people, not appearances. Comment below with a moment where someone was underestimated and proved everyone wrong. Let's remind the world what real authority looks like. Subscribe to Beyond the Model Minority for stories where justice isn't loud, it's final. Because the next Daniel Reyes isn't trying to belong. He's the reason the room exists. #invisible authority. Legacy power. Respect the roots.